It's a cartoon.
Yep. So working on Pokemon was probably my favorite show, because you're working on all of these other shows, and sometimes it goes straight to DVD, and maybe 10 people know it, or if you go to a convention they're like, yeah, here's a copy of that, and you're like, wow, I didn't even realize that they put that out. But it was amazing to watch something like Pokemon become this amazing popular show, and it's very humbling to have been part of something that, to me, I think, whether it's Shakespeare or not, the fact is that show opened the doors for a lot of anime to go from underground DVD to actually broadcast. And yes, things were changed to make it more sort of mainstream, so we get away from a little bit of the true anime stuff, but the defense of that is it made it so that it's universal and accepted by so many people who, I don't watch Japanese cartoons, I don't know what, no. People don't really associate beyond the anime crowd that Pokemon is anime. They just think it's a cartoon. And so when we aired it in other countries, I mean, I have fans, in England, in Australia, and all
Puerto Rico.
Yeah, any place that spoke English grew up watching me, my version of it. And obviously, when we dubbed it in other languages, Germany and stuff like that, they use other actors. But it became such a worldwide success that's kind of neat to be part of a pop culture history. I mean, if you ask my grandmother's no longer with us, but if you would ask my grandmother if she knew what Pokemon was, she would have said yes. You ask a 5-year-old kid what Pokemon is, they would know what it is. And you can't really say that about a lot of other anime if you're not in the geek culture like we are. And that's kind of neat. I think that's something to be very proud of, that it sort of opens some doors.
Well, speaking of Pokemon, since Pokemon USA took over for dubbing, do you miss doing James and Brock?
Sometimes I miss doing some of the silliness that we did, but for so many years, I think I worked on that show for 12 years and 8 movies, and so for so many years,
just about.
I still have those characters. They sit on in my studio. They sit on on my desk while I work, because to me, I feel very connected to them. But I think that the shift has happened, that the writers we were working with back then, the producers we were working with back then, there was a humor and also the moral of the story that I think was so important, which I haven't watched it since we haven't been working on it, and all I get is fan feedback, and you can imitate me, but I'm the funniest James that ever was, and I'm the funniest Brock that ever was, because we helped create those characters, and you watch the early seasons of it, and then what we did to bring, season 6, 7, 8, all that stuff, the evolution of those characters. So I miss playing them because I feel very connected to them, but I don't sit at home going, oh man, I wish I was still working on Pokemon, because I think the majority of the people that love that show grew up watching me do it. And so this is now fun to do conventions where I get to meet those fans. Because when we work in the booth, I don't know if you like what I'm doing, except for fan mail or the ratings that we get on television. But to actually do a convention where a fan might come up to me and say, you're the voice of my childhood. I grew up watching you. Every day after school, I watched you. Or even some of the heartfelt stuff where people say, I got teased a lot in school and I had a hard time fitting in socially, but Pokemon taught me about like friendship, and you helped me through tough times. As silly as that might sound, it's true. And that's, and to me, that's very flattering, and to know that I was part of something like that. So, and this is the only time I get to get that feedback, is when I get to meet fans face to face. So it is important for me to do this part of it too. I recently just did some conventions in Australia where, I know America grew up watching me, but to meet Australian fans who are like, man, I grew up watching you here. It's like, wow, worldwide reach, and that's humbling. It's very humbling.
Yeah, because I watched Pokemon back in middle school, and of course I was teased for liking it, but I didn't care.
No,
because come on, I like Pikachu zapping Team Rocket.
Right, and to me, there's definitely a formula to why shows like that are successful. And there are characters, and there's at least one character in the group that you can relate to. You don't have to like all of them. You might think Ash is too squeaky clean, or Brock's too much of a horn dog, or whatever it may be. But there's someone in that group that you like, that you can relate to, and the core of all of those shows, even though Team Rocket is bad, they're bad, and they're trying to steal Pikachu. It's still all about friendship, and there's a moral to every episode without getting preachy. Team Rocket are not bad people. You know, that's their job, is to, you know, that's what they're hired to do. But they're not evil bad guys. There's no danger of anyone really getting hurt or in the violence and all of that. And I think that it's fun when bad guys are silly. You know, my favorite villains of all time are always the comedic bad guys. Dick Dastardly and Muttley from the Wacky Racers back in the day. I rooted for them to win the races because they made me laugh. Team Rocket makes me laugh. So I think that when the bad guys are humorous, it also brings in more fans because they're not scared of them.
Since Funimation brought over Slayer's Revolution and Evolution R, how did it feel being gallery again for this?
That was really cool, and I think I have to thank, I think it was Crispin that said he wouldn't do it if the whole original cast didn't come back, which was kind of neat. Because that really was the first series, the main role I ever booked, and it was cool to come back to those characters. It's interesting. I mean, if you listen to the voices, I did Gowry long before I did Brock, and I'm not an actor who's going to tell you I have 100 different voices I can do. Now I do characters that sometimes kids or fans don't recognize that I'm the same actor. I get a lot of, wait a second, Brock and James were the same guy. I didn't realize they were the same guy. Now that's great, but I also am not going to make some claim that I do 100 different characters.
Right.
If you said play a young guy, the register I have is going to be somewhere between Brock and Gowry. Now Gowry was a little bit more Keanu Reeves. He was a little dumber, but they're the same. They're the same placement of my voice. And so I played Gowry first, and then when I started working on Pokemon, that's when I kind of toned him into a little bit more of my young Casey Kasem. That's my Brock. It's just funny to go back to that character after working on Pokemon for so many years. Then to go back to Gowry, which is like, well, he's really the first quote-unquote Brock, because he's the first person I did that voice for. So.
Yeah, I was actually surprised with how you did Gowry, because I heard clips before getting my copy of Slayer Season 1 years ago.
Yeah, It was tough to do, too, because I was really sick that week.
Oh, really?
I had to fly up. I was in Nashville. I flew up to New York for a week, and I was really sick, and I was, the worst thing for me is, if I'm getting a cold, my voice is going to get even deeper. So, Brock or Gowry are all up in my upper register, so that was kind of tough, but we got through it. I wish I was not as congested as I had been, but it's part of the deal. That's part of the deal, That's the thing about voice acting is, you have to really take care of your instrument, because you lose that a little bit of your voice, or you get sick, you can't work at all, At least a stomachache, I could still do it.
Right. I actually went through on the expo with a cold all 3 days, so interviewing actors wasn't easy.
Yep, so you understand. Yep.
Yeah. What was a challenge that you ever had while recording?
A challenge in terms of direction, or in terms of
like voice?
Either one, and like a really difficult piece of direction, or just something like they were asking you to do something really, really extreme with your voice.
Well, a lot of times when I've done video game work, there's a lot of screaming because of all the reacts and things like that. And I think working on a Yu-Gi-Oh game, as Kaiba, I had to scream a lot in different versions of, the subtleties of, and I'm a gamer, so I understand how the triggers work. You do something and it's kind of like a good move, you get a certain react from the character. If you really hurt them, you get a different kind of react. It might be the same dialogue, like, oh man, you're really good. Oh man, you're really good. All the different, variations of the same line. So doing that kind of repetitive work for 3 or 4 hours in a row is exhausting. But in terms of direction, it's because I've directed so much as well as acted. There's a lot of times that I have to bite my tongue when I'm acting and I'm working with a director that I don't think is really giving me the input that I want. The key to me to being a good director is understanding that you have to convince that actor you're on the same team. It's not my way against your way. It's here's the idea for the show, or here's the idea for the role. You're a piece of clay. I'm going to help mold you into that, because if I make you sound great, then we both win. But if I'm beating you to death with bad direction, and I don't know what I want, and we're having a conflict, I lose the respect from the actor, and they feel that they don't want to be vulnerable to open up and try something, because that dynamic is gone. So I've worked with some directors that have frustrated me.
Right.
And there's ways to get around that. I mean, it's still they've hired you, they're the boss in that situation, but you do it their way, you do it their way, you do it their way, and then hopefully at the end of that cycle you can say, hey, can I just try something? You don't need to keep it. I have an idea, let me see what you think. And that's how I can get away with sometimes throwing that stuff in there, and then they go, oh, we like that. And sometimes they might say, we don't like that. But it at least helps me get through some of those tougher directorial situations. It's an art form in itself. Some of the best directors I've worked for have never acted. They just understand the nuances of how to manipulate that character and give you input, clear, concise input. So yeah. And Dr. Z from Dinosaur King was physically tough. Yelling in that upper register for as much as I had to do, that was probably a bonehead move of me to pick that voice for that character. So.
Wow. What pointers do you have for anybody who wants to get into voice acting?
I do a panel at the conventions. I'll do one this weekend as well. I do two panels, one on how to get into voice acting and one on how to adaptation and directing, the two things that I've done in this business. And the short answer for voice acting is there are so many categories of what voice acting is. If your goal is to be a anime dubbing actor, then do something else, because that is a small percentage. Though you know me from that, I do audiobooks, I do commercials, I do industrials, I do anything that's involved with the voice. That's what I'm doing. So to limit yourself and say I only want to do that, there's not that much work. And you see the guests. We all work on we work on many shows.
And it's competition pretty much.
Yes, it is, and you got to be in a major market a lot of the times. Meaning New York, LA, now Texas, whatever. But that's for anime. That's not commercial stuff. But what the other side of it is, no matter where you are, there are still people that require the services of a voice actor. Local radio. That are doing commercials here, even working on a radio station, ad agencies that are in town, things like that. So you can still be a big fish in a small pond if you don't live in a major market. But I believe that it's about working with a good coach. Not every voice actor is going to tell you the same thing. I'm a singer-songwriter, musician who is a voice actor and a director. I don't do on camera, I don't do theater. Voice acting to me is fun, but that's a job. That's my job. It's always been my job. Music is my passion, voice acting, all that is my job. So there will be actors that will tell you, well, it's all about the acting, you got to take a million acting classes, stuff like that. I never took an acting class in my life. I just was a class clown. I did funny voices in school. I made the kids laugh. I was an entertainer, and because I was a singer, I knew how to use that instrument, and I just stumbled into voice acting from directing first and then getting on the other side of the glass. But that's not to say I can't act. It's still about acting. But to me, if you train with someone, even one-on-one, about voice acting and learning how to use that instrument, that's step one. Get some real honest feedback, get some training from somebody like that. I'm not saying you have to go and act in a play or go do some film festival. I'm not talking about stuff like that. I'm talking about coaching, and go to someone who is going to be completely honest with you, which is not always easy to find. People come to me and ask me to coach them, and I will be honest and say, I don't think you're good. I don't think you're ready for me. It's going to be too much work for me to get you to that point. Now, I could do tricks in the studio where your demo reel sounds fantastic, but then when you go out to do those jobs or those auditions, you're never going to recreate what we've done. So an honest opinion is also very important. But let's say you get to that stage where you have a demo reel done and you can send it out to a local casting agency in town or an ad agency. A lot of ad agencies have casting facilities in their buildings. Radio stations. Internships are a big thing too. I use in my panel, I talk about, okay, you got a radio station in town. If you come to that radio station and say, because they produce their own commercials at a radio station, right? Mm-hmm. So you come to a radio station, you say, I want a job. I want to work here. I want to learn. They're going to say, we're not hiring. But if you come to a radio station and say, I really want to be a voice actor. I really want to work in this business. I would like to intern here. I've got a couple hours a day, or this is what my schedule is a week. I can put in, I can help make copies, I can make coffee, I can clean up the studio, I can make copies of the scripts and bring them into the session, whatever it may be. The only thing I ask in return is let me watch what's going on in the studio. Let me watch the people that are doing this and learn from that. Because what's going to happen at some point, because of the secret of being in there, in that building, is let's say the young man, his name is John, and he's got an internship at the radio station. He's told the people there that he wants to get into voice acting, and he's cleaning up the kitchen one day, and they get a script that comes across their table, and it requires a young guy to read 2 lines in it about Pizza Hut. And they say, well, we don't have time to cast for this. We get this got to be on the air in like an hour. We got to do. Let's ask John to read this. See if he's any good. That's all it takes. All it takes is getting your foot in the door to actually read it, and then they go, oh, we've got a young voice actor that works here. This is fantastic. Let's have him read the local light news every day. Let's get him on the mic every once in a while. It's because you're there. It's the ease of hiring him because he's there. And that's kind of how stuff works. So the payoff of volunteering your time as an intern could lead to work because you maintain a relationship with the people that are doing the work. But what I would not say is pack up your bags and go move to New York or LA and try to compete against the hundreds and hundreds of people that are doing it. Always have another source of income so that you can, ride the entertainment wave as it goes. Yes, when I worked on Pokemon, great, no questions. But then when you don't work on it, you got to find something else to fill that gap, or you work on until the next show comes along. Which is why most of actors are waiters and waitresses, right?
Well, I did remember Greg Ayers was a lawyer for a little while, so. Right,
that's a tougher schedule, though.
Yeah.
If you're in the service industry like that, you can shift schedules around to be available for auditions. You're working in the evenings where most times that's not when voices are being recorded. But that's the other thing is, don't have a day job that you have no flexibility, to leave. Exactly. And then pursue voice acting or acting or anything like that, because all it will take is 2 times for them to request you, and you say, sorry, I can't get away from work.
Right.
Sorry, I can't do it. And they'll be like, and no more calls.
Right. Since Lil Karibo is here as a guest, have you ever seen his Yu-Gi-Oh! Bridge series?
I saw it early on in the beginning of it. Yes, I have seen it.
What did you think of it?
It's funny. I mean, I've talked about this too. I work for Konami. Konami is the boss, and they don't like what he does.
Really?
Yes, because it steps a little bit on copyright infringement. So, and I respect parody and I respect satire, and I've said this to him when he's been in a panel that I've done. I think that when you are clever and funny, you should do original content. It's one thing to do that for a little bit, but at some point it would be great to see him do something that was his own and not a dub, because Konami is very protective of their copyrights. When I do the signings at the Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournaments, I sit at a table, and for 3 hours, kids come and hand me cards to sign. And the vice president of Konami sits next to me and analyzes every card that's handed to me to sign, because if it's a counterfeit card, I'm not allowed to sign it. So to mess with a company that really doesn't like that kind of stuff going on, it would just be smarter to go do it where he could sell what he's doing and develop something original. It is what it is. Hey, if he was making fun of my music, I would beat the crap out of him because I'm from Brooklyn. But he's making fun of a show where I did very well on. And if you wanted to make fun of Pokemon too, I mean, they made Pokemon, the first movie made $85 million opening weekend. That's a lot more money than he's making showing spoofs of Yu-Gi-Oh! Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, go do something where you can really benefit from it. And that's what I mean. I have nothing against satire. I think it's all fine, but I can't be one to support that stuff and offend the people that do hire me to work because they don't respect it. They don't like it.
So since you're also a musician and you're going to be performing this weekend.
Yes.
I also heard you're releasing new stuff. What would we expect from it?
We decided to do a 4-song EP. This is actually going to be my 7th album release, and we had just released an album last June, and we've been playing a lot live, and there's a couple of songs that we've been doing live that have been very well received. The fans are really digging it, and they kept saying, when are you going to record this stuff? When are you going to record this stuff? I said, you know what, we should really just go into the studio and get a couple of these songs recorded so that we can get it out to the fans in between albums. It's kind of like a 7.5 album. But what's great is, and this is another thing that I'm very, very appreciative of, is my anime fans have supported my music, and through by Kickstarter funding the last album, our music video, we just funded this EP, because as an independent artist, we don't make money. What we want to do is we want to get our music out there. And for me to play a concert at a convention means I get to show my fans who like what I do for one thing of who I am, the other thing that's very important to me. And I think that anime fans prove that they are loyal beyond good, bad, and indifferent. Rock and roll fans, if you put out a good first album, they like it. Bad second album, they might give up on you and not buy that third. Anime fans, you work on a show they love, you work on a show they hate, then you work on another show, they'll give you a chance. And they work on another show, then they stay with you. And there's a loyalty there that has really shown through with the support that has been given to me for my music. So this is a little bit more of there's 4 songs on it. It's a little bit more of a trying to capture the live energy of the band. So a little more rock and roll, a little more guitar-driven stuff, a little more simple in terms of production. But I think anybody who's liked our previous stuff is going to dig it, and we're very excited. It's just nice. It's nice to see that when you sort of say to the fans, hey, if you really want to help me do what I really love. If I've made you laugh doing Pokemon, and if I've made you want to kill me as Kaiba because you can't stand me being such a jerk, if I've entertained you, then the thanks that I really appreciate is, tell me you love that stuff, but pledge $10 and get a CD from me and enjoy my music, because that's who I am. That's my soul. That's who I am. And so you'll really get a sense of who Eric Stuart is by listening to my music beyond just my silly voices. So.
Right. Will there be any new projects in anime anytime soon?
I'm working on. I've got a small recurring role on I think Yu-Gi-Oh. What's it? Zexal.
Yeah.
I play a shaman dragon / Asian wise man named Jinlam. And he's going to be coming back doing a little bit of stuff. But I do a lot of original content stuff. I help develop some shows, pitching and films and stuff like that, animation things, original content. Because of some of the directing I did, it's fun to be the actor. But when you're the director, especially on things like prelay shows, like I directed Viva Pinata, which is a terrible game but a very funny show. And I directed that show line by line. None of the actors were in the booth at the same time. I would record all the dialogue separately and then assemble the show to make conversation. Then send that to the animators to have them animate, and then come back and do ADR for little tweaks. So the pacing, the jokes, all of that was from my brain directing each actor, knowing that you're going to say this line, you're going to say that line, and I'm going to make it sound like you're talking to each other. And that creativity, it's kind of like being a master chef. Here's all the ingredients, and I get to do it. So I really enjoy going from doing all the anime stuff where you're sort of locked in, to here's the face, here's the lip flap, the line has to fit, even though the phrasing might be weird, it has to fit, to the freedom of original content and help develop new characters and new things like that. So I'm working on a couple things like that, which would be really, there's a couple of projects, I obviously, once again, the non-disclosure stuff, I can't really, which is what it is all the time. But there's one or two things that are in the works right now that if they come together would just be so much fun to work. I mean, I am a geek as well. I am part of the geek culture. Not as much as the hardcore anime stuff. I mean, I grew up watching Battle of the Planets, and G-Force was my favorite show as a kid.
I was the same way. That was the very first anime that
Yeah, my favorite. That's
that was
where
the
I got
first for a lot of us.
Mark is Casey Kasem, and that's of course why I used that voice for Brock, because that's the voice that I could do as a kid. Transmute. That's what I was doing. But I'm much more of a gamer geek. So. I love being involved in shows and projects that are the things that I would watch and do. So it's kind of fun. It's a weird, crazy career to be in, but I mean, and I would never have told you that this is what I'd be doing 25 years ago. Like, yeah, I'm going to be working in anime. I would never know that, but it's great. It's just a fun gig, and this is fun too, to be part of the conventions too, and see the cosplay and
of course.
And I just want to throw in one more thing about the convention thing that I think is from the outside people think it's all crazy weird, like it's Halloween stuff, right? But what to me the most amazing factor of all conventions is the freaks and geeks of school. Right? The outsiders in school, in society, we have a safe place to do what we want to do, show what we love to do, and here it's supportive and a great community vibe. There's always going to be some jerk here, there, or there, whatever. But the majority of people,
but that's everywhere.
Right.
Yeah, there's always a troll.
But the majority of the way people interact with each other here is a great template of the way society really should do it beyond an anime convention. I just think it's just a cool, supportive group, and that's neat to me. I was weird in school, but I bridged the gap. I played sports, and I hung out with the D&D guys. I'd have a friend over once a week, and we'd do Lego for 17 hours, and then I was the captain of the tennis team. So I mean, so I had both sides of that, from the jocks to but you know what? It's like, no matter what, even when you think you're cool, you're still an outsider.
Of course. Because that's how, kind of got into the Pokemon trading card game league, and then Yu-Gi-Oh, all that.
Yeah.
So it kind of moved up.
And that's what's neat about, but I think that's really, I think that's important. And that's what's neat to experience too, is to see that. Which is why, as a guest, I really try to interact as much, participate in panels, contests, stuff like that, because it's like, otherwise, why come? Like, hi, I'm Eric Stuart, thank you very much, and then disappear. Like, I like the interaction. It's a nice experience, of a weekend filled with that. So.
Right. I think that is.
Any other questions?
I think that's about it.
All right, then. Well, I think we can sign off then.
Yep.
What's the name of your show?
It's called Nerdy Chic Universe.
Nerdy Chic Universe?
Yes.
Okay. This is Eric Stuart for Nerdy Chic Universe. And you gotta catch them all.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.